The orchestra stopped abruptly. Security rushed toward the stage. From the center of the crowd, a woman in a flowing wedding dress emerged, running with tears streaming down her face and determination blazing in her eyes. Thousands of phones shot up simultaneously as she climbed onto the stage, breathless, in front of thousands of people. André Rieu stopped, stunned, staring at her without understanding what was happening. The entire audience fell into absolute silence. What happened in the next few seconds would not only change that evening, but alter the course of 2 lives forever. But this story begins 3 days earlier, when everything Zelda thought she knew about love, money, and what really matters was about to be shattered completely. Before we continue with this incredible story, pause for a moment and let me know in the comments below what city you're listening from and how old you are. And if this story touches your heart the way it touched mine, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring true stories like this one. Rain streamed against the windows of the small apartment in downtown Nashville, while Zelda stood in front of the mirror, trying on her wedding dress for the final time. The white silk gleamed in the soft light of the standing lamp, and for a moment, just a moment, everything felt perfect. "How you look absolutely beautiful," whispered Caspian from the doorway, his voice full of emotion. Zelda turned around, a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "4 more days. Can you believe it? 4 days until you're officially stuck with me," joked Caspian. But there was something in his voice, a tension that Zelda couldn't place. "Caspian, is everything all right?" He hesitated at the door, his hand on the doorknob, as if seeking support. "We need to talk." Those 4 words, "we need to talk," are the same in every language, and they always bring the same feeling of impending doom. Zelda felt her stomach drop. "What is it?" Caspian entered the room and sat on the bed, his head in his hands. "The factory, the company where I work, they've gone bankrupt." Zelda's world began to slowly tilt. "Bankrupt? But that can't be. You've worked there for 12 years. "There's more." Caspian looked up, his eyes red. "All our savings, everything we had saved for the house down payment, for the wedding, for our future. It was all in the company's retirement fund. And it's gone. Everything. The way the bankruptcy was handled, the employees have no priority. We get nothing back." The silence that followed was deafening. Zelda stood there in her wedding dress, a dress she had paid for in 4 monthly installments, that she had chosen with her mother, who was no longer alive, that symbolized everything she had dreamed of and felt their future falling apart. "How much?" she finally asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Everything. $42,000. Our entire life." Zelda walked to the window and looked out over the illuminated streets of Nashville, her hometown. The city where she had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. The city where in 4 days she would marry the man she loved. Or not. "We have to cancel it," said Caspian behind her. "The wedding, the reception, everything. We have no money left for the venue, the food, the music." "No." Zelda's voice was suddenly strong, determined. "No, we're not canceling. Zelda, be realistic. We literally have nothing left." "We have each other." She turned to him. "That's more than nothing." Caspian stood up and walked to her, taking her hands. "I wanted to give you the perfect wedding, the perfect beginning. And now? Now we have to be creative." Zelda's brain was already working, weighing possibilities. "We cancel the big reception. We make it small, only our closest friends. We can still get the certificate, we can still get married. And then, without money, without a house, we start over together." It was a beautiful sentiment, a beautiful moment of unity against adversity. But as they stood there, hand in hand in the small apartment, they both knew that reality was much harsher than romantic declarations. The next day, Orion came by, their best friend and the witness who would be at the wedding. He was a tall, slender man with kind eyes and a pragmatic view of life that was sometimes harsh but always honest. "You have to cancel it," he said immediately after hearing the news. "I'm sorry to be so direct, but you have no money. How are you even going to pay for the wedding clothes you already have?" "Mine is already paid for," said Zelda. "At least my dress is, and Caspian's suit is rented. And the city hall, the papers, $50. We still have that." Orion looked between both of them. "So you're really going through with this?" We love each other, said Caspian simply. Money doesn't change that. But money does pay bills. Money provides a roof over your head. Money isn't everything, Zelda interrupted him. My mother used to always say that the most beautiful marriages don't begin with the biggest parties, but with the biggest hearts. Orion sighed. Your mother was a wise woman, but she also lived in different times. It was then that Zelda saw the newspaper on Orion's lap. The front page showed a large photo of André Rieu, the famous violist, with an announcement of a special concert at Broadway Music Square, this very weekend. That concert, she said suddenly. When exactly is it? Orion looked at the newspaper. Saturday night. Why? Our wedding is Sunday morning. Yes. And? Zelda's brain began to work, forming a plan that was so daring, so unlikely, that it was actually crazy. But sometimes when you've lost everything, craziness is all that's left. What if, she began slowly, what if we do something that no one will forget, something that gives our marriage meaning, even without the big party? Zelda, what do you mean? Asked Caspian, concern in his voice. But she didn't answer directly. Instead, she took the newspaper from Orion and looked at the photo of André Rieu, at the announcement of the concert that would draw thousands of people, at a possibility so small it almost didn't exist. I have an idea, she said finally. You're both going to think I'm crazy. You'll probably try to stop me. But I think this is the only way to save our wedding. What kind of idea? Asked Orion cautiously. Zelda looked at him, then at Caspian, and saw in their eyes both concern and curiosity. Do you trust me? Of course I trust you, said Caspian immediately. Then I'm asking you both to give me 3 days. 3 days to prepare something. And Saturday night, I'm going to make sure our marriage is unforgettable. Even if we have no money for a party. The next morning, Zelda met her best friend Indira at a small cafe on Music Row. Indira was an energetic 30-year-old woman with an irrepressible spirit and a talent for capturing moments. She worked as a freelance videographer and had promised years ago to film Zelda's wedding. So you're really going to put on your wedding dress and run to a concert? Asked Indira incredulously after Zelda had explained her plan. Not just any concert, an André Rieu concert with thousands of people. That only makes it crazier, Zelda. What if they won't even let you near the stage? What if security stops you? What if, Zelda interrupted her. This becomes the moment people remember. The moment that proves love is bigger than money. Bigger than plans that fail. Bigger than common sense, Indira finished dryly. Zelda smiled despite the tension. Maybe. But common sense hasn't gotten me out of this situation yet. Indira stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Okay, let's be realistic. André Rieu's concerts have intense security. There are hundreds of people trying to get attention. Why would you be different? Because I'm not coming for autographs or photos, I'm coming for something real. And that is? Zelda took a deep breath. I'm going to stand on that stage in front of thousands of people, and I'm going to tell the world that Caspian and I are getting married without money, without a big party, without all those things people think are important, but with love, with real, genuine love. Indira stared at her. And you think André Rieu will just let that happen? I don't know, but I have to try. That afternoon they went to Broadway Music Square to scout the terrain. The square was already being prepared for the concert. Technicians were installing huge screens, sound systems were being tested, and everywhere people were busy building the spectacular decor that André Rieu's concerts were famous for making. Look at how much security there is, Indira pointed to men in black jackets standing at every entrance. You'll never get past them. There has to be a way. They walked around the square, observing, planning. Zelda wore simple jeans and a t-shirt, but in her head she was already visualizing how it would be. Her in her wedding dress, running through the crowd, the moment of shock when people realized what was happening. Wait, said Indira suddenly. See that? She pointed to a section on the side where the audience would stand closest to the stage. If you can get tickets there, you might have a chance. It's close enough that you could reach the stage before security reacts. But those tickets are probably unaffordable. Indira smiled. Leave that to me. That evening Orion appeared again at Zelda's apartment, his face concerned. I talked to Caspian. He doesn't know what you're planning, but he's worried. He doesn't need to worry. Zelda, he loves you. We all love you. But this plan, it's crazy. You're going to make yourself ridiculous in front of thousands of people. Or I'm going to create something that has meaning. Something that shows that love still matters in a world that only seems to care about money. Orion sat down, his hands folded. And if it goes wrong? If they drag you off the stage before you can say anything? If people laugh instead of being moved? Then at least I tried. No one can ask for more than that. Caspian doesn't know about this plan, does he? No, and I don't want him to know until it happens. Why not? Zelda looked out the window at the lights of Nashville. Because he would try to stop me. Out of love, out of concern, out of fear. But sometimes you just have to jump and hope there's someone below to catch you. The days crawled by with the slowness of molasses. Indira worked on getting tickets. Through a friend who worked with the organization, she had gained access to 2 places in the front section. It cost me a favor and a promise, she said, but we're in. Zelda rehearsed what she would say, standing in front of the mirror in her wedding dress. Each time it felt different, sometimes powerful and convincing, sometimes weak and desperate. She didn't know which version would come when the moment arrived. What if I can't do it? She asked Indira during one of their preparation sessions. Then I'll take you home, and we'll forget this ever happened. But what if I can do it? What if this is the moment that changes everything? Indira looked at her friend and saw something in her eyes she had never seen before. A mixture of fear and courage so intense, it was almost physically palpable. Then, Indira said softly, you don't just change your own life, but maybe that of everyone who sees it. The evening before the concert, Caspian came to Zelda's apartment. He still didn't know about her plan, and the guilt was beginning to gnaw at Zelda. I love you, he said as they sat together on the couch. Whatever happens, that never changes. I know, she whispered, her head on his shoulder. Maybe it's better this way. Maybe we weren't ready for a big wedding. Maybe small and intimate is better. Zelda felt tears prick. He was trying to be so brave, so accepting of their fate, but she knew that deep down he had been looking forward to their big day, to the moment when he could call her his wife in front of all their friends and family. Tomorrow, she said suddenly, tomorrow I want you to trust me. I always trust you. Even if I do something that seems crazy. He looked at her curiously. What are you going to do? You'll see tomorrow. Broadway Music Square was transformed into a sea of light and sound. Thousands of people poured onto the square, their voices mixing into an excited murmur of anticipation. The summer evening was perfect, warm but not too hot, with a gentle breeze blowing through the old streets of Nashville. Zelda stood in the shadow of a side street, dressed in her full wedding dress. The white silk gleamed in the evening light, and passers-by turned their heads to look at the strange sight of a bride standing alone, staring at the crowd before her. Are you ready? Asked Indira, standing beside her with her camera already on. I don't know. Can anyone ever be ready for something like this? Probably not, but that's never stopped you before. In the crowd, closer to the stage, stood Caspian with Orion. He still didn't know what Zelda was planning. Indira had told him she had gotten tickets for the concert as a gift, and that Zelda would come later. Where is she? Asked Caspian for the 10th time, looking at his phone. She's coming, Orion assured him, though his own stomach was in knots from nervousness about what was going to happen. On stage appeared André Rieu, and the audience exploded in applause. He smiled broadly, his violin in his hand, and began, as always, with a warm greeting to his audience. Good evening, Nashville, he shouted, and the crowd cheered. What a beautiful evening for music. Zelda felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment. As soon as André began interacting with the audience, which he always did halfway through his concert, she would get her chance. Okay, she whispered to Indira. We're going in. They moved through the crowd, Zelda's wedding dress drawing immediate attention. People pointed, whispered, took pictures. Some thought it was part of the show, others just looked amazed. Look, a bride, shouted a child, pointing. Zelda smiled at the child but kept moving, her eyes fixed on the stage where André was now playing his first number. Indira followed closely behind her. The camera focused on Zelda's back as she navigated through the crowd. Caspian heard the whispers before he saw her. A bride in a wedding dress. What's she doing here? He turned around and his world stopped. There, moving through the crowd with a determination that was both brave and terrifyingly bold, he saw Zelda, his Zelda, in her wedding dress, heading toward the stage. "What?" he began, but words failed him. Orion put a hand on his shoulder. "Let her go. She has to do this." "What does she have to do? What's going on?" But Orion just shook his head and pointed forward, where Zelda had now reached the edge of the stage. Security saw her immediately. Two large men in black jackets moved toward her, their hands up to stop her. "Ma'am, you can't come here," one of them said sternly. "Please," said Zelda, her voice surprisingly calm despite her pounding heart. You need to return to your seat." But then something unexpected happened. The crowd around Zelda began to shout, "Let her through! Let the bride pass! She just wants to get to the stage!" The murmur grew, spreading through the mass of people like a wave. André, who was in the middle of a number, heard the disturbance and stopped playing. The orchestra followed his lead, and suddenly the entire Broadway music square was filled with the sounds of thousands of people shouting for a bride they didn't know to be allowed through for a reason they didn't understand. André walked to the edge of the stage and looked down, saw Zelda in her wedding dress, the security trying to stop her, and the crowd defending her. "Wait!" he called to security, his voice amplified by his microphone so everyone could hear. "Let her come!" The crowd cheered. Security hesitated but stepped back, and Zelda, her legs trembling but her determination unbroken, climbed the steps to the stage. Each step felt like she was walking through molasses. The stage seemed endlessly far away, though it was only meters. She was aware of thousands of eyes focused on her, of phones going up to capture this bizarre moment, of Caspian's voice calling her name from the crowd. And then she stood there, on the stage of Broadway Music Square, in front of thousands of people, facing André Rieu, who looked at her with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Hello," he said softly, only audible to her above the murmur of the crowd. "What can I do for you?" Zelda opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her carefully rehearsed words were gone, replaced by pure panic. The audience waited. André waited. The entire world seemed to wait for what this woman in a wedding dress had to say. And Zelda realized she had no idea how to begin. André Rieu saw the panic in Zelda's eyes and did something he had learned in his 40-year career. He gave her space and time. "Just breathe," he whispered, turning his microphone away so only she could hear. "There's no rush." Zelda nodded, her hands trembling as she tried to get her breathing under control. Broadway Music Square had become so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Thousands of people held their breath, waiting for what this mysterious bride had to say. In the crowd stood Caspian, paralyzed, his brain still trying to understand what was happening. Orion held his arm, not sure if it was to stop Caspian or to support himself. "What is she doing?" whispered Caspian. "Why is she there?" "Watch and listen," answered Orion. André turned his microphone back and spoke softly. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a special guest tonight, a bride." He looked at Zelda with kind eyes. "What's your name, dear?" "Zelda," she stammered, her voice barely audible even with the microphone André held toward her. "Zelda," repeated André, his warm tone making her feel a little less afraid. "And tell us, Zelda, why are you here tonight in your beautiful wedding dress?" This was the moment, the question everything revolved around. Zelda looked out over the sea of faces, strangers all curious, some amused, others moved by what they suspected was a romantic gesture. And there in the crowd she found Caspian's eyes. He looked at her with such a mixture of love, confusion and fear that it broke her heart and made her stronger at the same time. She began, her voice still weak. She stopped, took a deep breath and tried again. "I'm supposed to get married tomorrow." A collective murmur went through the audience. André nodded encouragingly. "Tomorrow," he repeated. "And why are you here tonight instead of at home resting for your big day?" "Because," Zelda felt tears coming but fought against them, "because there almost wasn't going to be a big day." "What do you mean?" Now the words poured out, as if a dam had burst. "My fiancé Caspian and I, we had planned everything. Everything. A beautiful venue, a party with all our friends and family, a beginning for our new life together. She stopped, her voice breaking. But then his company went bankrupt, and all our money, all our savings, everything we had saved for years, it's gone. The audience was now completely silent, absorbing every word. We had nothing left. No money for the venue, for the party, for anything. And everyone said we should cancel. That we should wait until we could save again, until the timing was right. "But you're here," said André softly, "so you didn't cancel." "No." Zelda shook her head, and now she let the tears flow freely. "Because I realized something. All those plans, all that money, all those things we thought were important, none of them determine whether our marriage has meaning." She turned toward where Caspian stood, though she couldn't see him in the crowd. "Caspian, I know you're out there, and I know you probably think I've lost my mind." Nervous laughter went through the audience. "But I wanted you to know, I wanted everyone to know, that I still say yes. Tomorrow, without a big party, without a beautiful venue, without all the things we had planned, I still say yes because you're the only thing I really need." Broadway Music Square didn't explode in applause, as you might expect. Instead, there was a moment of deep silence, the kind of silence that only comes when thousands of people are simultaneously touched by something. André Rieu, who had experienced more emotional moments in his career than he could count, felt his own eyes grow moist. "That," he began, "that might be the most beautiful thing I've ever heard on one of my stages." He looked out over the audience. "Caspian, where are you? Come here." In the crowd, Caspian stiffened. Orion pushed him forward. "Go. They're waiting for you." "But Caspian began moving through the crowd. People made room for him as he walked toward the stage, his thoughts a chaos of emotion. Pride in Zelda's courage, shock at what she had done, love so deep it was physically painful. When he climbed the stairs and came onto the stage, Zelda and he stood facing each other in front of thousands of witnesses. André carefully stepped back, giving him and his orchestra space for this moment. "You're crazy," said Caspian, but his voice was full of love. "I know," answered Zelda, "but I had to do it. I had to show everyone that we're not giving up. That love is bigger than money, than plans, than everything." Caspian took her hands. "I can't believe you did this. Believe it. But why? Why risk public humiliation?" "Because," Zelda interrupted him, "if we don't share our story, if we don't show that real love is more than perfect plans, then it's as if it doesn't exist. And our love exists. It's real, and I wanted the whole world to know." André came forward again, his microphone in his hand. "Caspian, Zelda has just done something very brave. She's opened her heart to thousands of strangers. Do you have something to say?" Caspian looked at Zelda, then at the audience, then back at her. "Yes, I want to say that I'm the luckiest man in the world. Not because we have money or perfect plans, but because I have this woman." He looked at André. "And I want to ask her if she still says yes, even now that she's seen how messy and imperfect our life is." Zelda laughed through her tears. "Of course I say yes. That's why I'm here." It was at that moment that André Rieu did something completely unexpected. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a small white handkerchief, one of his famous handkerchiefs he always carried with him. "Zelda," he said softly, but clearly enough for his microphone to pick up, "in my culture, in my tradition, we give a white handkerchief as a symbol of luck and blessing." He carefully unfolded it and placed it in Zelda's hands. "This isn't a magical object. It won't pay your bills or solve your problems. But it's a reminder that sometimes when we've lost everything, we also get the chance to start over with what really matters." Zelda stared at the handkerchief in her hands, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank you," she whispered. "And now," continued André, turning to the audience, "we have a wedding to attend tomorrow, don't we? But I think we can start celebrating tonight." He gave a signal to his orchestra, and they began the opening notes of a classic wedding song. Not loud or flashy, but soft and intimate, perfect for the moment. "Dance with your fiancé," André told Caspian. "Here now in front of all these people who have heard your story and been touched by your courage." Caspian looked hesitantly around at the thousands of faces staring at them, then at Zelda, who smiled at him with such pure joy that he couldn't help but smile back. "May we?" he asked, extending his hand. "We may," she answered, placing her hand in his. And there, on the stage of Broadway Music Square, Caspian and Zelda danced their first dance as an almost married couple. It wasn't the perfect first dance they had planned for their reception. There was no professional photographer, no decoration, no perfectly rehearsed choreography. But it was real, and that made it more perfect than any planning could ever have achieved. The audience watched in breathless silence as the couple danced, their love so tangible it seemed you could touch it. Phones went up, but for most people this was a moment to experience, not just capture. Indira, still in the crowd with her camera, filmed everything with tears streaming down her face. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered to no one in particular. Orion stood next to where Caspian had been, his own eyes moist as he watched his best friends have their moment. He had thought Zelda's plan was crazy, even reckless, but now, seeing how the entire atmosphere of the concert had been transformed by their courage, he understood it. This wasn't about seeking attention or making a spectacle. This was about claiming their story, about refusing to feel shame about circumstances beyond their control, about showing that love was a choice they could make anew every day. When the song ended, the audience finally burst into applause. Not the polite applause of a good performance, but the kind of applause that comes when people have witnessed something that has touched their hearts. André Rieu let them enjoy the moment before raising his hand for silence. "Caspian, Zelda," he said, "you've given us something precious tonight. You've reminded us of what's truly important." He looked out over the audience. "And now I want to ask something of everyone here tonight. How many of you are here with someone you love?" Thousands of hands went into the air. "Then I want you to look at that person, take their hand, and tell them why you love them. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now. Because as Zelda and Caspian have shown us, there's no guarantee of tomorrow, there's only now." A ripple went through the crowd as people turned to each other. Lovers embraced, friends patted each other on the shoulder, families drew closer together. The entire Broadway Music Square was transformed into a moment of collective love and appreciation. André turned back to Zelda and Caspian. "And for you two, I have one more surprise." He signaled to someone backstage, and a moment later someone appeared with a large envelope. "This," said André as he handed them the envelope, "is a contribution from my foundation to young couples in need. It's not much, but it should help with the costs of your wedding tomorrow, and maybe a small beginning for your new life together." Zelda opened the envelope with trembling hands and saw a check for $7,000. Her knees went weak. We can't accept this," she stammered. "So you can and you will," said André firmly. "Consider it an investment in love, and maybe someday when you're back on your feet you can do the same for another young couple who needs help." Caspian couldn't find words. He stared at the check, at André, at Zelda, his brain still trying to process everything that had just happened. "But there's one condition," added André with a smile. "You have to invite me to the wedding tomorrow." The audience laughed, and Zelda began crying again. But this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Of course," she said. "You're more than welcome. You made all this possible." "No," André corrected her gently. "You made this possible by having courage, by believing that love is worth fighting for, even when the whole world is watching." He turned to the audience for the last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Zelda and Caspian a standing ovation for showing us what true courage is." The entire Broadway Music Square stood up. Thousands of people clapped, cheered, cried. It was more than applause for a stunt or a romantic gesture. It was recognition of something deeper, something human and universal. As Zelda and Caspian were escorted off the stage, surrounded by orchestra members congratulating them, and an audience cheering them on, Zelda felt a peace she hadn't felt in months. Not because their problems were solved. $7,000 would help, but it wouldn't take away all the challenges that lay ahead. But because she had proven to herself and to the world that their love was more than circumstances. It was a choice, a commitment, a promise they would make anew every day. Backstage, away from the crowd, Caspian and Zelda held each other tightly. "I can't believe you did that," he said, burying his face in her hair. "I can't either," she laughed. "But it was worth it, wasn't it?" "More than worth it. You're incredible. Indira came running toward them, her camera still in her hand. "That was the most beautiful, most crazy, most perfect thing I've ever seen," she cried, hugging them both. "And I got it all on film." Orion had arrived too, his usual pragmatic self temporarily abandoned for pure emotion. "You're both crazy," he said, "but you're also inspired. I've never seen anything like that." They stood there in a group, 4 friends who had together created a moment that was bigger than all of them. And while they could hear the muffled sound of André's orchestra continuing with the concert, they knew their story had just begun. That night, back in their small apartment, Zelda and Caspian sat on the couch watching the video Indira had shared. It had already gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, thousands of comments from people around the world who had been touched by their story. "Look," said Caspian, pointing to a comment, "this reminded me why I married my wife. We forgot in all our daily stress. Thank you." Zelda read another. "I'm crying. This is the most beautiful love declaration I've ever seen." They scrolled through dozens, hundreds of messages from strangers who had picked up their story and found meaning in it. "We've become a symbol," said Zelda softly. "A symbol of what? Of not giving up, of believing that love is more than perfect timing or perfect circumstances." Caspian kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow we get married, really married. With André Rieu as a guest," Zelda added. "How is this our life? I don't know, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." The next day, the wedding was small, intimate, exactly as they had planned after everything had gone wrong. But it was also perfect. André Rieu did indeed come, brought his violin and played while Zelda walked down the short aisle of the small room in City Hall. There were only 22 guests, their closest friends and family, but it felt like the whole world was present because of what had happened the night before. When the officiant asked if Zelda would take Caspian as her lawful husband, she smiled and said, "Yes, I already told thousands of people yesterday, but I'm happy to say it again. Yes." The audience laughed, and Caspian kissed her before the officiant could even say the traditional words. Later, during their small reception in Orion's apartment, André made a toast. "To Zelda and Caspian," he said, raising his glass, "who have taught us all that the most beautiful moments in life are often the ones we don't plan, who have reminded us that courage is not the absence of fear, but doing what's right despite that fear, and who have proven that love, real love, is not defined by what we have, but by who we are when we think we have nothing." Everyone clinked their glasses, and in that moment, Zelda felt a completeness that no amount of money could have bought. Months later, when they looked back on that unlikely evening at Broadway Music Square, Zelda and Caspian realized that losing their savings was the best thing that had ever happened to them. Not because financial loss is good, but because it had forced them to reconsider what was truly important. They hadn't had their big party, hadn't gotten their perfect start, but they had gained something much more valuable. Proof that their love was stronger than circumstances, and a story that would continue to inspire others long after their own wedding had become a memory. And every time they doubted, every time life got difficult, they could look back to that evening at Broadway Music Square and remember they had stood in front of thousands of people and told the world their love was worth fighting for, and the world had applauded back. But their story didn't end there. 6 months after that magical night, Zelda and Caspian received a letter from André Rieu's foundation. Inside was an invitation to participate in a documentary about love stories that had touched his heart during his concerts around the world. Their story would be featured alongside couples from different countries, all of whom had found ways to overcome impossible odds through the power of love and music. The documentary, titled When Hearts Meet Music, premiered at film festivals across America and Europe. Zelda and Caspian found themselves invited to red carpet events, sharing their story on morning talk shows, and receiving letters from couples who had been inspired to fight for their own love against all odds. What had started as a desperate act of courage had become a beacon of hope for people facing their own seemingly impossible situations. André himself became a close friend to the couple. He would visit Nashville whenever his tour brought him near, and Zelda and Caspian would attend his concerts whenever possible, always receiving special recognition from the stage. The handkerchief he had given Zelda became their most treasured possession, framed and hanging in their modest but happy home. A year and a half after that night at Broadway Music Square, Zelda gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Harmony, in honor of the music that had brought their story to the world. André sent a hand-carved violin as a gift along with a note, for when she's ready to make her own music. During Harmony's christening, André played a special piece he had composed called Zelda's Courage, which would later become one of his most requested songs at concerts worldwide. Their financial situation gradually improved. Caspian found work with a smaller, more stable company, and Zelda started a small business helping other couples plan meaningful weddings on tight budgets. They called it Love Over Luxury, and it became incredibly successful, featured in wedding magazines and blogs across the country. They never forgot their promise to André to help other couples in need, donating a portion of their profits to young couples facing financial hardship. 3 years after their Broadway Music Square moment, Zelda and Caspian were able to buy their first home, a small house with a garden where they could watch Harmony play. On the wall of their living room next to André's handkerchief hung a photo from that night. Zelda in her wedding dress on stage, Caspian's face filled with love and amazement, and André smiling in the background as thousands of people witnessed their declaration of love. Every anniversary they would return to Broadway Music Square, just the two of them, and dance to the same song that had played during their unexpected first dance. Other couples began to notice this tradition and started their own anniversary pilgrimages to the square. The city of Nashville eventually placed a small plaque commemorating the night love conquered all, and it became a popular spot for marriage proposals and wedding photos. Their story continued to ripple outward in ways they never could have imagined. Wedding planners began offering Zelda packages for couples who wanted meaningful ceremonies without breaking the bank. The local city hall created a Love Over Luxury program, providing free ceremony services for couples in financial need. André's foundation expanded its mission to include emergency wedding funds for couples facing unexpected hardships. But perhaps the most meaningful impact was personal. Zelda and Caspian's marriage, tested by crisis before it even began, had become unshakable. They had learned early that love wasn't about perfect circumstances, but about the choice to support each other through imperfect ones. Their friends often marveled at how they seemed to handle life's inevitable challenges with grace and humor, never forgetting that they had already survived the worst and emerged stronger. As they tucked little Harmony into bed each night, they would sometimes tell her the story of how Mommy ran onto a stage in her wedding dress and changed their lives forever. And Harmony would giggle and ask if she could do something that brave when she grew up. "You can do anything, sweetheart," Zelda would say, "as long as you remember that the biggest adventures start with the biggest leaps of faith." Their extraordinary love story, born from loss and transformed by courage, had become proof that sometimes the most beautiful endings begin with the most unlikely beginnings. And in a world that often seemed to value wealth over heart, status over substance, their tale continued to remind everyone who heard it that love, when it's real and brave and true, will always find a way to shine through the darkness and illuminate the path forward.